Hello class, George here, and in this video, we're not going to just blindly jump into code, because at the moment, there's this interesting distinction we have between the files we're working with. That is, we have these XML files that define the layout, as well as other things too, such as strings I had mentioned before, a resource, and then we have the code side. And what I kind of want to do is take a minute to bridge the world of the layouts and the resources represented in these XML files with that of the code. And we're going to do this by talking about strings. Specifically, we're going to do what I had mentioned in the last video, where instead of directly defining strings over here in this widget panel, we're going to store them as resources. And this is a wonderful habit to get into early on because it's going to make your life a lot easier later on. In addition, because storing things as resources is such a huge part of Android, doing that with something as simple as a string just gets you familiar with the process so that later on, when you're dealing with all kinds of different resources, this process isn't vague. When we're in our layout and we click on, say, the button over here, and we come down to the text region, we just typed in our own text. But in reality, when we press ... you can see that there's a lot of different resources already available to us. Many of these, actually all of them, generated by Android automatically. Now there's a button down here called Make New Resource. If we click this, we see New String Value. We're not going to click that just yet. What we want to do is take a look at under Resources or Res, Values, a file automatically generated by Android called strings.xml. Now this file doesn't have to be named this. In fact, you can have multiple different XML files that contain strings and you can name them whatever you want. But let's look at the structure of this really quick. So we have a resource definition here at the top and the bottom. And then of course we have a string. We supply a name for that string. The value of what that string should be is then nested in between these two tags, the start and the end tag. And that's all it takes to add our own strings. So let's do this in two different ways. We're going to do one manually. Actually, no, let's not do the manual one first. Let's do the automated system. So let's click on this object here. Let's do this one, Magic 8-ball at the top. Let's come on down and find the text for this object. Click on the ... dots and go to Make New Resource, New String Value. So we have the resource name, which is the name we're going to refer to it not only in code, but also in this XML, these editors and so forth. We have the value, which is what's going to actually show up on the screen. That's the real string value stored in the name. These next two bits don't matter as much. Actually, most of this doesn't matter at the moment. We'll be talking about these in much more detail in the future. But we have our file name, which is the file we're going to be storing this in. And as I had mentioned, the file name doesn't have to be that strings file. It can be your creation of your own. So let's go ahead and create something. So let's do, so there is a format to how this whole thing works. And actually, let's take a minute to look at that. We'll notice that the name of the string is going to be using underscores in lowercase, whereas the value can be whatever you want to. So just remember that it's good to keep that convention going. Click here, make a new resource, new string value, and let's call this Magic 8-ball. And the value is going to be Magic 8-ball, and the rest of this is fine. Hit OK. Automatically, you'll notice there was a small change there because I spelt out 8 instead of writing the letter 8. And what you'll see over here is that the text value is now referencing, and to reference something, or that is to grab hold of a resource, we use the @ symbol, followed by string, followed by then Magic 8-ball in this case, being the name that we specified. If we run over to strings.xml, we'll take a look now that we have a new string that has been auto-generated by Android Studio for us. Here is the string name that we had specified right there, as well as what value we want to be in there. We can do this on our own though, and I do encourage that you do this. So do string name is going to be equal to, and I always put spaces in things. Let's do the start and end tags. Android will do that for you automatically, which is really nice. Take a look at our app over here, and we need one called get answer. I'm going to call this get _ answer _ button. Now it's up to you. You might want to put button at the beginning because when you start using IntelliSense to search for things, you might want to be searching for a button, and that's the only thing you remember. So you want to have that at the beginning. It's entirely up to you. So here our value is going to be get answer. Save. And let's do the last one as well. I'm just going to copy this line and paste it down here. And let's do default. And just put default. Default is going to be replaced with Magic 8-ball descriptions later on. Now let's click on our get answer region, click over here, ... And now we need to browse for that resource. So let's do button, and you'll see here's get answer button right there. Click that, okay. Click on default. That search is incredibly handy. Let's click on this one, type in default text, okay. And now that is referencing that string. And what's important now is these values are now separated from the actual XML design. And if we did want to create different string batches for different locations based on localization, that is where you are, what language you selected. You could make, a Spanish version, a Japanese version, whatever language you want to inside of here. Now we've hooked things up. Now what's important to understand is this isn't magic, okay? There's a very specific thing happening here that's going to allow us to go from these XML files into the world of Java itself. And in order to kind of get rid of some of the mysticism going on here, we're going to need to change our project view. So we're going to want to change our view from Android to, in this case, we can do either project or packages, but I find packages to be easier to find. And under our app right here, George Lecakes at my first app, or whatever yours would actually be, we have all the different files, such as our application, my first app file right here. And then we have this file called R. R is our resource file. And all of those different resources that we defined inside of our XML files are actually going to end up over here. More importantly, though, is the fact that we can look at this file and very much understand that this is all Java code. None of this should be frightening to you. And this is how we transform things from the XML side into the Java side. So when you're working inside of Java, you're actually going to be using these values to access and find the resources that are stored in the XML. Well, after they've been inflated, of course. But the idea is that we're providing them with real names over here. So let's do a quick search. I'm going to hit Control F and type in string. And we're just going to keep moving down in this file because it can be massive until we find the list of all the different strings. There it was back there. So here we have a public static final class string. And above it, we have mitmap, which should, if we come over to, let's do our Android view, mimic what you see over here. So there's our mitmaps over there. Actually, if we scroll up, we have our layout, and above that, somewhere is going to be drawable as well. But as you can see, these different folders are converted into actual classes by Android. And then the values you place within these, such as strings, let's move that over here, split this vertically. There we are, close it over there, and come back into here. You can see now that we have a lot of custom strings, not custom, but a lot of default strings that Android provided for us automatically. But at the bottom, we have an app name, which was generated when we created this file and gave it a name. We have default text, and what it's doing is giving it an integer value. Every one of these is getting an integer value specified, of course, in hexadecimal. Every one of these is getting an integer value, which is what we use to find it later on in Java code using a hex value over here. So there's our default text, our get answer button, our magic 8-ball value, and then something else down there. But that's where these values over here come from. And these are the names you're going to be using in the code side to find these different elements. So hopefully now you see that in Android Studio, you generate XML files. Android Studio smartly generates this R file for you, which automatically takes this information and specifies public static final integer values for each of these. And please don't go in here and make changes. This file is automatically generated. As you can see right up here, it even says files under the build folder are generated and should not be edited. So please do not edit these files. All of your changes will be lost. This is Android Studio handling all of this for us. So please don't try to say, hey, you know what? I don't like that particular hexadecimal value. Let's change that up. I want something in the lower 6s. 7s ain't cool. So hopefully now you're starting to get how things work. XML files, resources converted into a class by Android Studio. Each of these elements, each of the resources are given integer values, and these integer values are used to find and look up different objects later on. In the next video, we're going to dive now into the code side of things and begin using those different resource values that we specified we actually do it already on the screen, but I'm not going to explain it just yet. But we're going to use those resource values to grab references to things like the button right here, as well as this text field, to make changes on the code side of things live, rather than having these static elements that you see here. Thanks, class. See you next time. Bye.